destiny cannot escape my sword. Your ruin fast approaches. I shall present you with a chilling chaos.
This guy looks busted. Hey everybody, it's Mace1370. We are finally getting Straze. Let's talk about his abilities, how we might build him, and good team compositions. Before we get into it though, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, please see the video description below for a link to my Discord. So Straze is a Taurus warrior, which means that he has the same base stats as Green Yufine. His attack is 1,228. This is very good for warriors. It's one of the highest base attacks as far as warriors go. I believe the highest is Sirmia. She has over 1,300 attack. So 1,228 attack is, really good for a base to build off of. His health of 5,784 is definitely on the low side. His speed of 109 is higher than average, and his defense is lower than average at 553. So you can see just looking at those four things that he is a very offensively, built warrior. He's easy to get high attack on, and his speed is decent, which can help you if you're trying to play a turn 1 team. But I think it's going to be harder to make him fit into a bruiser composition, given that his health and defense are both a little bit on the lower side. So his imprint release and his imprint concentration are both attack based, and that'll help along with his kit. As you'll see in a moment here, he's a fairly attack focused hero, and so being able to imprint concentration to give himself more attack is going to be pretty valuable. Skill 3 is Star Extinction. This is an AoE ability that also penetrates the defense of the target on the enemy team with the highest max health by 30%. When the caster's attack is greater than the penetration target's attack, the penetration rate increases up to 100%. Here it says when an enemy is defeated, grants invincibility to the caster for 1 turn. Smilegate has clarified this, and there is no condition to get the invincibility, so you don't have to defeat anyone. Whenever you use skill 3, you get invincibility, period. So obviously stronger than how it's worded here. This is an interesting skill. It looks really powerful. It has a 6-turn cooldown. You can take it down to 5 with Molas. So you're not going to be using this probably more than once a fight if you're playing a turn 1 type of cleave team. But it's going to be very similar to Operator Sigrid or Watcher Shuri, where you're essentially just deleting somebody off the enemy team. I think the interesting thing here is that you don't really have control over who that defense pen applies to. And I think that could matter in some scenarios. If you're playing an aggressive turn 1 team, there are times when you don't necessarily want to execute the Aureus holder. Many times you do, but sometimes the enemy team will have Maid Chloe or Ruel, for example, and those heroes usually have less hit points than the Aureus holders like Crow and FCC, and it might be more valuable to you to get rid of the Reviver than it is to get rid of the Aureus holder. So not the greatest. I think that you can't really decide who's going to have the defense pen applied to, but I think he's definitely going to be killing someone. Not having a condition attached like the shield thing with Operator Sigrid makes this pretty strong. He's going to just blow up, a high HP unit when you use this skill. So overall, very powerful. Okay, skill 2 is Destructive Gaze. This is another AoE attack, and it dispels 2 buffs from all enemies. It ignores effect resistance of any targets with attack lower than the caster's attack. So this is another part of his kit that is built around having high attack. When there are 3 or fewer enemies, damage dealt increases with fewer enemies. This last part is probably not super important. A nice bonus. Looks like a 3-turn skill, so you can use that pretty frequently, and you can soul burn it for the low cost of 10 souls to decrease the skill cooldown by 2 turns. So that means you could just spam this over and over again, which is pretty absurd. I've said it time and time again, 10 cost soul burn abilities are borderline broken just by themselves. We've seen it with a Tywin, and other units like that. It's really impressive, really fast. He has ignore effect resistance built into his kit, which is also absurdly strong here. This is one of the things that makes Basar so broken, the fact that he can soul burn and ignore ER, and Straze just gets it. So this is going to completely remove the RNG component from this skill, right? If you have higher attack than the opponent heroes, you will do the buff strip, period. You're never going to get 15%ed. So I think that he has an incredibly impactful skill 3 and skill 2. So another, great fit for a cleave team. You're basically just coming out with like 2 really powerful punches out the gate. And if you have souls, you could just keep doing this skill 2 over and over again. So he's going to be immediately impactful, which is, I think, very important in this meta right now. It's a very aggressive meta. I think also that if he could be built as a bruiser, it's probably going to revolve around, this particular part of his kit in mind, the idea that you can just continually do this. Either way, I think it's going to be really strong, either in a cleave or a bruiser setup. In many situations, you're going to use the skill 3, you're going to nuke away a big tank, and then maybe Maid Chloe or somebody like that goes and puts a revive buff on everyone. Straze comes back around and just, wipes it off everyone like it never happened. So this skill looks very strong. So skill 1, Powerful Strike. This is a single target ability. Swings a sword to attack the enemy and increase combat readiness of the caster by 20%. It's a nice little bonus to have on skill 1. Helps you, loop back around and get back to your big nuke more quickly, but overall pretty inconsequential. I think in the vast majority of circumstances, if you're using this ability, the battle has already been decided, since he seems very aggressive and his skill 2 and 3 are very impactful. So not a bad skill 1, but also not super relevant probably in the grand scheme of things. Alrighty, well right now the servers are down, and so we have to look at potential builds in the Fribbles Optimizer instead of in-game. I put a few stats here that I wanted to shoot for. I decided 240 speed would be a good place to run him. I wanted 100 crit rate, and then, at least 250 crit damage and 3500 attack. These numbers here, the attack and crit damage, are basically just to filter out, really low results that I'm not interested in seeing, since we already have results above these numbers. And given, these parameters here, we can see a potential build with 3850 attack and 284 crit damage. I think this type of build would do well in a G-Purg cleave setup, since I think Straze will really benefit from an attack buffer. And having him at 240 allows, your G-Purg at 250 or 255 or 260 or whatever to go first. So think of this kind of as an Operator Sigrid build. You're not using him as the opener, you're having him follow up after your attack buffer goes. This is without imprints. I don't know if I said that, and so with imprints, you can probably expect to get around 4k attack, I would guess, with this type of gear. It'd be pretty close. So overall, I think that this could be a pretty viable way to build him in a cleave setup. Alright, I wanted to see what type of damage numbers I could get if I speed-tuned Straze to 200 speed and gave him really high effective EHP, so at least 100,000 EHP. I put 100,000 because he doesn't have very many defensive things in his kit other than that 1 turn of invincibility, and so I wanted him to be able, to take a punch. And looking at these numbers, this is almost certainly not enough damage, since if we sort by damage here, the best we're getting is like 1k attack and not even 250 crit damage. So pretty disappointing numbers overall. I think if I was going to run him as a bruiser, I would have to either slow him down to get more damage, or would have to sacrifice some bulk. So another consideration could be potentially running him on counter set, so let's take a look at those numbers. Okay, well this is a little interesting. I put in kind of a similar build to Fire Ravi here, where we have him speed tuned to around 150 to 160, and sufficient bulk here to take a hit. So he's over 100,000 EHP. You can see he's almost 17k defense here and 1400, almost 1500 attack. Here he gets just about 250 crit damage and a little over 3k attack. We can maybe, if we wanted to sort by attack instead, let's see, that really drops the crit damage. If we filtered by, like, let's say filter 240 crit damage, yeah, it's going to be hard without imprints to break above 3100 attack. This build could have some promise though. The artifact he is on is Draco Plate for all of these builds, by the way. I think I forgot to mention that. So you could potentially switch him to Sigurd Scythe if you were going to do this build, since it would give him, a little bit more sustain rather than Draco Plate. So that could be an interesting option. I think, the artifacts for him are going to be pretty variable, since warrior artifacts in general are not very strong. You can kind of tailor the artifact choice to exactly what he's looking for. I think this type of build could have potential, since the counter set would enable him to get some CR boost if he counters, because his S1 would push him forward and would make up for the fact that he has kind of low speed. So this is, I guess, a build that could potentially work. I think, my counter gear is pretty good. You can see the gear score of his items here are all pretty high. So I think these are the type of stats you could reasonably shoot for. You could potentially drop his tankiness down a bit and go for more attack. I think we're going to have to wait to see his multipliers to know for sure if this is, the type of build that, could actually be effective. Okay, last but not least, we have something of a meme build, I guess. You could kind of do a carrot type build on him, where you run him, fast around 200 speed, and for the most part ignore, crit chance and crit damage, and then try to get decent bulk with high attack. The idea here would basically be to spam S2. So depending on your gear, I unchecked use the current equipped items, so you could probably do better than this, but you could build him pretty thick and then just turn cycle quickly and spam his S2 as fast as possible. Could be utility in some comps, potentially maybe. And then how viable this is probably dependent on how his mods end up being. So I'd be curious how you guys are going to build Straze, how you might use him in different team compositions, and also what artifact choices you're thinking of. I've heard people mention everything from Draco Plate to Sigurd Scythe to Creation and Destruction. So I think there's, Hellcutter even, I think there's a ton of options since warrior artifacts are all kind of similar in power level. Otherwise, that's all for now. Later.